So you're a new player who's just gotten into Pokerogue. You think, wow, this is a Pokemon game, how hard could it be? Only to get to maybe level 10, I've seen people lose there, level 25, or level 50. That is called the early game. Pokerogue has 200 levels. It is pretty easily split up between levels 1 through 50, 51 through 144, and then 145 through 200. I like to justify them as an early, mid, and late game. These are going to be some tips and tricks to help get you through the early game, as well as just some generic good tips and tricks as well. Starting with number 1, the starters. When you start Pokerogue, you first start out with all of the 3 starters from the first 9, or from all 9 generations, all the way down to Quaxley being at, number 27. That being said, not all of them are made equally. Of course, I have, a little more unlocks and better, Pokemon to talk through, but relatively speaking, you want to pick a fire type, a water type, and a grass type if you are doing so. I know that's crazy, but fire, water, grass is a very common core used in single battle formats for Pokemon. It has a lot of resists. They all resist themselves, so they make it easier to swap in on each other, as well as they resist, like, grass resists water, fire resists grass, water resists fire, etc. So you have multiple switch-in options. Now, you have to remember that Pokerogue functions differently than regular Pokemon games. Regular Pokemon games, you get TMs throughout the game a lot more consistently, and you can give your Pokemon egg moves and IV and EV training. You don't have EVs, and getting TMs is not very easy, as well as egg moves are not typical for what you have for Pokemon. Say I go to, let's say, as an example, I go to Rufflet. You can see this Rufflet has Floaty Fall, which is a Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu exclusive move, Dazzling Gleam, and Heat Wave. Those are not moves that this would normally get as egg moves. Of course, it's not a starter, but it still files in. My Bulbasaur, for example, has Giga Drain to start the game. That is incredibly powerful. Now, if I were to choose any of the 27 starter Pokemon, I would always start with Fuecoco. Fuecoco is the best late game starter before you include hidden abilities and egg moves. That is because Skelly Dirge has access to the move Torch Song. What Torch Song does is it is a 80 base power fire type move that Skelly Dirge learns as soon as it evolves at level 36. And what Torch Song does is it's 80 base power, but every time you use it, it raises your special attack by 1 stage. That makes Skelly Dirge the best late game starter before you factor in hidden abilities and egg moves, of course. As well as, it's just a good Pokemon because it has an immunity. That is another reason why it is one of the best starters. It has Fire Ghost typing, which is a pretty good typing. It is weak to Ground, which of course makes sense, Fire type, Rock, Ghost, Water, and Dark, while having 2 immunities to Normal and Fighting. As well as being resistant to, 7 types. Poison, Bug, Steel, Fire, Grass, Ice, and Fairy. That is a very, very good defensive spread, and, as long as you play properly, you don't have to worry about weaknesses. Switching in on immunities is incredibly, incredibly valuable in single battles of Pokemon. Now, for the second starter I would pick, I like to go with Chespin. I think Chespin is a very good grass type. Not only does Chespin have a very good stat distribution for early game, having, relatively lower special defense, but you see less special moves early game, and having a high defense and high attack stat, it also is a just a grass type in general, which means it hits water, rock, and ground efficiently with access to Leech Seed at level 15 and Rollout. Rollout is a very, very powerful move in a game like this. Rollout, Fury Cutter are some of the best early game moves in the entire game, because as they stack up damage, they do just that. You can continually stack damage during trainer fights with Rollout and with Fury Cutter to just bowl over the opponent, even through resist sometimes. Now, one thing to keep in mind about Pokerogue is stat boosts last between battles. Say you use Torch Song on Fuecoco, previously mentioned, and you finish the battle and then go to a next battle. You will still have that stat bonus and stat decrease. Of course, not in this exact scenario, but you'll still have that stat bonus. That does not apply to Rollout and Fury Cutter. It does apply to things like Stealth Rocks and Weather, or Spikes, Toxic Spikes, but will reset when a trainer battle happens. I'm not sure the specifics on why it's like that, but it's something to keep in mind, that if you set Weather up, or Rocks, or Spikes, or Toxic Spikes at the beginning of a floor, as long as there are no trainer battles, they will stay throughout the rest of the fight. Why do I bring that up for Chespin specifically? Because Chespin has access to the move Spikes through TM. I thought that was a very good segue into that. You want Chestnut late game if you have access to the Spikes TM. If you do not have access to the Spikes TM, you can cut it for any grass, fighting, or anything in general. Something that fits its defensive and high attack profile works just as well. And Chestnut has a great typing as well. It resists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 types in water, electric, grass, rock, dark, and ground, with having 5 weaknesses to fire, psychic, ice, poison, and fairy, and then a 4 times weakness to flying. You might be thinking, wait, isn't that like a lot of weaknesses? And in theory, you would say yes, but having a dark resist, a ground resist, and a water resist is invaluable. Water is the most common type in the entire game. Dark is a very prominent type in later game, same with ground. And it's just a lot of very strong Pokemon get to be placed in these later levels that are going to be dark and ground types. Putting Chestnut as a very good resist to those types as multi-value. Chestnut also has access to Spiky Shield on evolution. It is one of the better protect options. Of course, you can always make an argument between which kind of protect is the best, but this one, it will deal 1/8 of the damage back to a hit onto your Spiky Shield if it is a contact move, which, as you know, most Pokemon have very bad learn sets, meaning a lot of them have things like Tackle, or Quick Attack, or Astonish, or things of that nature, which means you are getting free chip damage to block that damage. It's not always going to be that great, don't get me wrong, but you can use Leech Seed and Spiky Shield, or regular Protect, I guess, to stall your opponent, gain health back, and because things like Leech Seed, Toxic, Burn, all do percent damage, it is a lot of damage against late game, of course, and Chespin getting Leech Seed pretty early is very, very useful. Spiky Shield is also, again, one of the best moves in the entire game because it is a guaranteed Protect effect. Protect is easily the best move in the entire game. You can scout moves from opponents to see if they have a super effective move because, again, move pools are random based on what the Pokemon can learn, so sometimes they just won't have it. It lets you PP stall your opponent, so you can get moves that are scary out of the way. Like Earthquake only has 10 PP. If you can block 5 of those with Protects, you don't have to worry about an Earthquake. It applies to other moves as well. And then you have the fact that if you have Speed Boost, Leftovers, anything like that, Leech Seed, Tox, all that, you can get so much more value from having Protect. Spiky Shield being a guaranteed Protect on your Pokemon is very valuable. The next starter that I would say you should use is Mudkip. Mudkip is easily the best Water-type starter, especially when you don't have hidden abilities in mind, because Swampert's hidden ability isn't even that great to begin with. Defensively speaking, type-wise, Water-Ground is one of the best types in the entire game. It has 1 immunity, 4 resists, and 1 weakness. Of course, it is a 4 times weakness to Grass, but as long as you play properly, and Grass isn't that common of a type late game, you should be fine. One thing to point out, though, Swampert has low access to physical water-type moves, which does suck, but it does have things like Stone Edge and Icy Wind for support as a TM option. But remember this, you have Earthquake only through a Memory Mushroom, and it's only after Swampert evolves. So Swampert is a great defensive pivot, but it's not that great offensively unless you get a Memory Mushroom. And then once you get Earthquake, I mean, Earthquake is one of the best moves in the entire game. You can pretty much spam it or Rocks against anything. Swampert learns Rock Slide through Level Up, which is a great move for the doubles portions, and it's just a good move in general. As well as Swampert's special attack stat isn't anything to scoff at. It's not amazing, but you won't feel bad using Hydro Pump as your water stab. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I have my starters chosen. What does that really mean for me? It doesn't mean anything, actually. When you pick 3 starters, you have 9 of the 10 slots that are being chosen. You can see right here. A good way to use up the early game is to use up that 1 slot. If you have access to egg moves, or if you have access to having caught a lot of Pokemon, that really becomes useful. You can lower the cost of Pokemon through candies. As you can see here, if I have caught 30 Sentrets, I can reduce the cost by 1 for 30 candies. But Sentret already costs 1, so it would be 0. Or if you use it on something like Totodile, which costs 3 naturally, it costs 20. Or, of course, if you do something like a Pseudo-Legendary, it would cost 15 because they cost 4. And then you have something like Deoxys, which costs, I think, 7. It costs 5 to reduce. They go up in price every single time, of course, but that is something to keep in mind. Now, back to 1-cost units. There are a lot of very good 1-cost units, but then you have things like Scatterbug. Do you think Scatterbug is good enough early game to justify the fact that it is not useful late game? If you answered no, you would be correct. The really, really strong ones, in my opinion, are Sentret, being a just good early normal type. It's relatively fast, relatively strong, and I mean, yeah, like there's not much more to say about it. But I like to use Sunkern. I will admit, my Sunkern is really fucking broken. It has Sappy Seed and Mystical Fire, which are both, not moves it would ever learn this early. So it's way, way, way stronger than it needs to, or than it would ever be. But it's just, a usable thing that I have because I got lucky with eggs. Another very good one is Paris. If you get First Impression, it's probably the best one-cost unit naturally if you have First Impression on it, because I mean, do I need to explain why an 80 base power priority bug move is very strong early game? I don't really need to. Another great option, though, is Rattata. Rattata is amazing. It scales relatively well with Raticate. It has Guts as its ability, so if you get a paralyzed or poisoned or burned, you don't care, you get stronger. It's a very, very strong early game unit because, well, it's just a Rattata. It has access to Quick Attack at level 5, and that's the big one. Quick Attack at level 5 makes it the best non-egg move, non-hidden ability, yada yada, 1-cost unit. Quick Attack, priority matters a lot. Priority is important. I think that Rattata is easily the best 1-cost unit that at least I have access to. There might be others that I don't have access to yet, I will be honest with you, but you understand where I am getting at. You have to understand that, say you do have access to more Pokemon. What are good Pokemon to take early game? One of the best by far early game Pokemon is Pawniard. Pawniard, look at my Pawniard. It has no hidden ability. It doesn't have any egg moves, but I still have I've won 2 runs taking Pawniard to be in the game. Do you want to know why? It's for everything about Pawniard. It is a dark type, which is great because that's an immunity. It lets you hit ghost types super effectively, which is pretty rough early game. Sometimes it just happens. You don't have any ways to hit ghost types super effectively or psychic types, and dark really will do a lot there as long as you can get some levels. It is a steel type. Steel is the best type in the entire game for every stage of the game. It's the best for late game because you have to fight against a Mega Rayquaza and an Eternatus. It's best for mid game because you have to fight against everything on the planet. Steel resists most things. And it's great for early game because you're fighting a lot of bug and normal types. As well as Pawniard has access to, what's this? Fury Cutter, a move that I had previously claimed is one of the best moves in the early game. If you don't know what Fury Cutter does, let me read it off for you. Fury Cutter is a 40 base power bug move. Every time it hits in a row, it does double its base power. So it's 40, then 80, then 160. You can understand why that's incredibly good. No Pokemon has access to 80 base power moves early in the game, and you only have to use Fury Cutter twice. As well as, no Pokemon will have access to a 160 base power move ever. Moves that have that high of a base power are not that strong, or they're very inaccurate. Fury Cutter has a 95% accuracy. Yes, it's not 100. If it's not 100, 0% in Pokemon. Everyone knows that. But there's nothing in the game stronger early than Fury Cutter. For early game, Fury Cutter is king. Pawniard is the best Pokemon early game, bar none. Now, I just raved on and on and on about the Steel type, and you might be thinking, oh, okay, well, what about something like the Rock type? Rock is also good against normal and bug early game. Is it, though? Think of it this way. What is Rock weak to? Rock is weak to Grass, which is relatively not that common. It's weak to Fighting, which again, isn't that common. Then it's weak to Ground, which is a very, very popular type late game because things like Excadrill is in 2 zones. It is in any ground zone, which obviously is there, and any steel zone. Steel being another great type in the Rock. And then you have the last weakness of the Rock type, Water. Water is the most populated type in the entire game. It's at multiple different zones. There are multiple different zones of water. There's like deep ocean, there's beach. All of them are going to have water. Rock is not a good type overall, as well as most rock types aren't that good. It's something that is a little weird that people don't talk about. Most rock types aren't actually good Pokemon. They're just middling. They have middling defensive stats, and you want to, if you're using something for its defensive profile, it has to actually have good defensive stats, which most rock types don't. They're usually very physically defensive and have negative special defense. Something like, let's say, Larvitar. Larvitar early game, it's terrible early game. It has the Rock Ground type, which is one of the worst type combos in the game, having two 4x weaknesses to Grass and Water, which are very popular types overall, but not really so much late game for Grass. Tyranitar is a great Pokemon, of course, giving you Sandstream, which gives a lot of Pokemon access to, sand-based abilities, Sand Rush, Sand Force, Sand Veil. But early game, Larvitar is terrible. I wouldn't consider almost any Pokemon worth using overall. Sudowoodo is a rock type, which has bad stats. Most rock types have bad stats. Another rock type with bad stats and a bad typing is something like Onix or Rhyhorn. You might get Rhydon. Terrible stats, and it's too slow to be offensive. It's not tanky enough to have any use, especially because I keep, telling you about the bad typing. As well as a lot of rock-type Pokemon require special things to evolve. Steelix requires a special item to evolve, right? Rhyhorn requires a special item to evolve. I guess Sudowoodo doesn't, so it didn't really fit my example. But a lot of rock types just aren't very good, especially early game. Especially early game, they're not good. Another type that you might be thinking of is Ghost. And yes, Ghost is a fine early game type, being immune to normal, which is, easily the most popular early game type, and being, immune to fighting. But that's a double-edged sword. Not being able to hit normal types with your stab moves is pretty weak. Of course, this is all just meta talk. That doesn't really mean that much if you just have strong Pokemon and can do strong things. But you have to understand that there are just there are just things about this game that are also out of your control. Yeah, you can bring a steel type, but sometimes you face Chile at level, I think it's 30 when you get your first boss. You could just fight Chile, and then you're just like, fuck, dude, I have all these steel types, and what do? You don't do anything. That happened to me, actually. I fought Chile when I had 3 steel types on my team, and I got wiped, and I was so pissed. I had a great run going. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. Another thing to watch out for is fighting types. Fighting types are usually very, very strong, and they have overall good spreads. Being able to hit rock, steel, dark, and normal for super effective damage is genuinely very powerful early game. I like to have a fighting type as early as I can, or a fighting type move. It's very, very useful to have, and I think that is something that you have to take into account when you are picking your Pokemon. The last type that I do want to talk about is, of course, the Dragon type. You have to talk about Dragon type. It is not immune. It resists fire, water, grass, and electric, while only having one type resists dragon, and one type is immune to dragon, which are fairy and steel, which are not common early game. Fairy and steel are very uncommon early game, so dragon is just incredible of a type. Yes, dragon is weak to ice, dragon, and fairy, but again, those are not common types in the first 50 levels. So if you have a strong dragon type, use it. If you have a dragon type you like, use it. It's easily one of the best types. I have used Jingmo-O because it's a dragon fighting type. It's really fun to use. It's one of my favorite Pokemon, and it's pretty decent. Of course, this isn't talking about specific Pokemon, which are very good. This is more talking about types, and I guess Pawniard, which is one of the best in the entire game. But yeah, this is an early game guide. If you enjoyed, tell me down below. You have to remember the most important part of Pokerogue early game is levels 8, 25, and 50. You might be saying to yourself, oh, what's so special about those? Level 8 is the first time you fight Ivy, your rival, and she will fuck you up if you are not prepared. She will. My friends in real life have somehow wiped to her multiple times. I still haven't done wipe to level 8 Ivy personally, but I don't know how they do it. Level 25 is the next Ivy fight. She is a lot stronger. She'll have an evolved starter. She might have, some really strong Pokemon that shouldn't be accessible at that point in the game. Things like that. Level 30 is going to be the first boss that you fight. Okay, this is the Crasher Wake! And it is very tough, especially coming off of that level 25 fight. You're going to be weakened. You're probably not going to have all your Pokemon, so it is a very tough fight that you should heal for. You should spend money on if you don't think you can beat it. It's very dangerous. And then level 50, yeah, you have a little bit more lenience because you don't have anything aside from the occasional trainer battle between that and level 30, but it's still a relatively tough fight for where it is placed in the game. You're probably going to fight some fully evolved Pokemon. It is a very, very difficult fight for its stage in the game, genuinely speaking. So please, please, please prepare for that. Everything past that is mid-game, so I'm not going to be going into that much more than I have so far in this video. If you enjoy, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you think below. Did I miss anything important? Do you have any questions that I can answer? And yeah. So this is my first ever real, pretty highly edited, long-form content video. If you could please share this around, that would be nice. It is definitely going to be a little less love channel, and then of course the Pokemon channel is a lot smaller, so I would really appreciate for anyone to share it around. It would help me a lot. I love this game. I would prefer to get into it over Hearthstone currently, but it is what it is. Thank you for watching. I know it was pretty long, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.